Hello everyone, my name is Patrox. Today I wanted to do things a little differently and cover something that is gonna hurt for me to talk about. I don't want to edit this video because I feel like the emotional weight behind my words are also going to matter just as much as the words I say. And I also, honestly, needed a break from reviewing a lot of the companies because especially the ones that we're going to get to, they're old, they have a lot of history, and just so many bad things. Each one's probably going to be a two-parter themselves. So instead I wanted to do a video on me a bit and talk about some of the history of where I came from physically and mentally that led me to the point that I'm talking to you now. So I need to cover a few things, such as my youth in the church, my history with fascistic thinking and fascistic appraisal, and what it was like once I was finally by myself. So I guess let's go from the beginning. Let's start with the church. Growing up, I don't really have any ideas or memories of my life in a church before my dad remarried my stepmom. That was where I really think I legitimately had every first impression of Christianity, of church, of Christians, all that, the Bible, everything, all at once. I'm an 8-year-old kid. And the church I go to, my father tells me, is a non-denominational church. This will later on in my life ring a lot of alarm bells. For those who do not know, non-denominational means that, in this context, that a Christian or a church does not adhere to any religious practices or any specific focal point on their preaching. It is that they care more about what the book says at the end of the day. This is also very gray in terms of what most people actually are under this, given my experience. It is, I feel like it's a softer word for fundamentalist. Now, that is a lot more precise in its meaning and definition. I mean, even just talking about, fundamentalism, that in itself was a religious movement that emerged in the late 19th century, kind of early 20th century, in response to what its adherents perceived as a growing secularism. A lot of the arguments you hear today, how there's a growing push for secularism, it's not. People just losing their faith. But they pushed this thinking in a response to more people becoming secular and liberal in America. The movement is characterized generally as a strict focus to what essentially is kind of fundamental parts of the Bible, as well as kind of rejecting more modern, more scientific reasoning, kind of more modern social practices or changes that are brought about, all kinds of things. Fundamentalist Christians generally believe that the Bible is the literal and inerrant word of God, and that it is the sole authority on matters of faith and morals. That's the part that made me say non-denominational is kind of just a softer word for fundamentalist. Kind of like how people on the right and far right will like to say non-consensual sex instead of rape. Because even though you're describing the same thing, one feels less worse than the other. And that's in itself a lie. I don't like that. So even though going in I was told it was non-denominational, it was really fundamentalist. So I'm just going to be saying fundy because it's so much easier and quicker to say. But yeah, it was really hard, and it's hard to deal with that because so many people in my family have this type of rationale and thinking. This type of rationale and thinking rejects any historical or literary criticism as the Bible because they view the Bible as complete, reliable, and what's the word? It is unable to be changed or destroyed with anything. So basically, they put the Bible even above, scientific research papers. If you want to ask them about their weight of their faith in something, they would probably do that. You know, if you want more kind of characteristic identifiers, these are people who are very conservative in their, kind of just political views, completely opposing things like abortion, which, by the way, is in the Bible and is approved by both Moses and God in the temple. So they're already wrong about that. LGBTQ rights, which myself have argued this with my family already, explaining that, a lot of the passages that are used to justify this have already been proven to be mistranslated. But fundamentalists reject the idea of literary and historical criticism. They don't like the idea of doing things better. They don't like progressive movements. They don't like progressive ideology. They don't like progressive thinking, critical reasoning, or anything like that, because that would require you to go against what you fundamentally believe is true. In addition to their, theology and social beliefs, fundamentalists or fundies also tend to be highly evangelistic, which was characteristically what the church we went to at the time actually was. It wasn't a non-denominational church, it was an evangelistic church. If any of you know about the Calvary Chapel Ministries, that was the one that I went to. We can cover them another day. They were also very missionary minded. I had a lot of my own family members do missionary work. One of the most notable being that that I had family members that went to Russia, Israel, and I had friends that went to places like Kenya, Mozambique, I think, and one that went to I want to say Venezuela, but I think I'm wrong. They went somewhere South America. But yeah, it's just it's really hard. Dealing with family and friends that think this way whenever you are noticing that you don't. They believe that it's their duty to share their faith with others, and I did not. They believe it's their duty to convert as many people as possible. They're talking about proselytizing people with their particular brand of Christianity, especially. It's important to note that not all Christians who hold conservative or traditional values are fundies, although I like to think that there's a really good chance that you could probably win that bet. It's still pretty much ingrained into that thinking, especially more nowadays than it was 10, 15 years ago whenever I started going, But like I said, the church I went to was much more evangelistic than that, even though it had a lot of fundamentalist underlyings. For those who don't know about evangelism, it's literally just a practice of preaching the Bible to other people, or spreading the Christian gospel, if you will. It is the very act of proselytizing, if you will. I don't really need to find a wiki definition of it for you. I'm sure you all know already. But when you combine the idea that the Bible is the sole authority on morals, history, and existential questions and stuff, and how you should live your life, and you combine it with the initial practice of preaching, what you consider to be a good word, it can lead to disastrous movements, and it could lead to a lot of toxic thinking. It could lead to a lot of self-hate. It could lead to a lot of internal guilt and questioning for years to come. I know, because I'm preaching from my own personal experience about this. I am still dealing with the amount of Christian guilt that I had come from. I think what's I forget the channel's name, but there's a thumbnail and a title of this atheistic channel that I really like, that says that there's no hate like Christian love. And I think that's really true. I really do. Having been part of it, it is absolutely true. As I'm going through the motions at church like any kid normally would, I am constantly corrected about my behavior, my actions, and the things that I do. And this is all before we even learned that I was on the spectrum. But like as a kid, I would intentionally sleep in, the little kids ministry stuff. I didn't care. When it came to being a little bit older, a lot of that was kind of guilted out of me, if you will. I was told things like I made angels frown because of my misbehavior. I was told things like God wouldn't be too happy unless I really stuck to the word. I was told that if I don't adhere to the word, God could smite me down tomorrow, and I would deserve it. These are real things that have stuck in the back of my head. I I'm sorry. It's actually a lot to relive right now. Um, but moving on, the thing that kind of really hit home was a few key moments throughout my teenage years, actually. At one point, we would eventually go to a Baptist church whenever I was around 16, probably a little before that. But honestly, I really had the most challenging parts of my life between the ages of 12 and 14. I remember a very key moment where I'm asking my parents, bigger questions on the Bible because I'm suffering an existential crisis. I'm asking my parents, do you believe that Revelations will actually play out the way that it is written? My father, without question, says yes. Absolutely. And I am baffled. I am in shock because if any of you have read Revelations, I don't need to explain a damn thing as to why it is crazy, why it is unbelievable to believe that this will literally happen. But as a fundie, yeah, and you're an idiot for questioning it. Another key thing that had come to me was the church's version of sex ed that I was placed in, where I was basically told masturbation will guarantee my spot in hell. Looking at another man with lustful eyes will guarantee that God will forsake me. Or not forsake me, but that God would deny me. That, even being interested or learning about sex would make me lesser of a man to any of my future wives or anything like that. Like a lot of these things that are just wrong, that are just bad reasoning, and they're just guilt tripping, that it's just really hateful abstinence, sex ed, which is not good. Abstinence sex ed has been historically proven to not work, but we're not talking about that right now. I remember another moment having what my family was trying to do at the time, which was have a family night. This was every Thursday night at the time. And I remember a key moment where we were asked to write down everything that we felt negatively about when it came to our family or friends or anything, right? And I would write things like, I feel like my brother's annoying. I really hate this kid at school because, I don't know, he kicked me or something, and blah, blah, blah. And we would write down a bunch of these. And I was given a bunch of thumbtacks, and I was told, put a thumbtack into each one of these things that I had written. And we did. And then when we removed the top paper, we were told, you know what? No. When we removed the paper, underneath it is a picture of Jesus bleeding on the cross. And each one of the thumbtacks, we were told, is how many times we stabbed Jesus. This is a real thing. I'm not joking. I'm not making it up. Yeah, that leaves an impression on you as a kid who doesn't even understand his own emotional state yet, because we don't even know that he's on the spectrum. These, in combination with so many other things that I could list off, led to a lot of internalized dissonance. It led to a lot of bad reasoning and a lot of, bad actions in how I conversed with people. I would see my father and how he interacted with other Christians, and the reasoning he even uses today is that other Christians aren't real Christians because they don't believe the way he believes. That other Christians are wrong because of this, and that they are all lying in the face of God. I don't want to paint my father in a bad light, but at the same time, I don't want to censor what he has said, because these are things that I have internalized, that I have under rationalized at the time, and it didn't serve me well. It led me to dismissing people's opinions or views. It led me to dismissing people's experiences, you know? And when everything is in relation to the Bible, well, if it isn't in the Bible or you're not acting like the Bible, then you're just wrong. It's plain and simple. And it's easy logic to follow. You don't have to do a lot of work. You don't have to do a lot of thinking. And that's part of the problem. Especially when you're so smart but arrogant, you can fall for this stuff so easily because arrogance will lead you to not want to question yourself. Why? You know you're smart. And that's the problem. I feel like that specifically is the problem my father has and the problem I had for the longest time. But we can probably go into bad practices that the churches do another day. I mean, we could cover things like the NIFB. We can cover, Westboro. We could cover more Calvary Chapel stuff and some personal things that I have heard. But that's probably better for their own episode, But having this fundamentalist Christian thinking would be the justification for a lot of other bad things I would do. When I would eventually turn 15, I would be in high school and I would make friends like you do. Except the friends that I made were particularly fascinated with World War II. More specifically, more fascistic characters of World War II and the Cold War. What do I mean by this? My two best friends at the time idolized Mussolini and Stalin, to just put it bluntly. And I hadn't the slightest clue as to how fucked up that would be. I hadn't the slightest clue to realize just how wrong that all is. Because I had no firm, concrete understanding of what fascism is, how it came about, how it is defined, and even today, how poorly understood it really is. See, it was easy to demonize people like Hitler because of concentration camps. It's hard to demonize Hitler whenever you saw, if you're an American, that you saw that this was a foreign leader who was getting his economy back on track, and he was, raising the average living of his citizens. But the way that he did it was the problem. It was the practice, not the end result, that was the problem. You can never justify the end results in this situation when you're killing people, when you're taking over countries, when you're using slave labor, and you're forcing actions. But the problem is that at the time, a lot of people were willing to give it up because they believed the same myth. Now, to describe the problem with fascism, we'd have to first truly get to the heart of fascism. And we'll do a more detailed episode on it. But let me give you a kind of TLDR answer. A very simple one that often gets thrown out is the term blood and soil. Blood and soil itself means the people of your nationality, the people of your heritage, the people of your culture. The soil means the country from which you are upon. So when we apply this to Nazi Germany, we're saying the types of Germans that they focused on. So we're not talking about immigrants, we're talking about the quote-unquote Aryan race that Hitler really wanted. And we don't need to talk about soil because that obviously meant Germany. The justifications for that was they lost World War I and the price they had to pay was too unfair. So this was retribution. A more, descriptive word or set of words that I like is that fascism is palingenetic or palindefensive ultranationalism. Palingenetic just meaning, the same type of people that you were trying to describe, or a specific group, or, what's the word? We'll just say group. A specific identifier for a group of people, white people, black people, queer people, women, stuff like that. These types of identifiers. Usually used for national pride, ultra-nationalism being, key here. We're not just talking about a love for your country. We're talking about a fierce love for your country, so much so you'd be willing to kill your neighbor if they spat on your country's flag, kind of ultra-nationalism. Pal and defensive is really just more of an argument saying that we need to protect the people, of our nation. Palingenetic says we need to kind of focus on the core of the people themselves and raise them up out of some perceived slight against them. There's even greater definitions of this. One way that I like to describe it is not with specific words to define things as an all-encompassing thing like we do normally, but rather by its actions. A lot of fascistic countries focused on stirring up their people emotionally to feel that they were wronged in a great way, that their people are great and they deserve greatness, and that they will achieve greatness by any means, often by excising or executing a bunch of people or deporting them elsewhere. Or you also take control of the industries. You have companies like BASF that'll work for you. Either you took them over or they're willing to churn out all this product for you because it brings them profits. So a heavy reliance on a capitalist industry, a heavy reliance on, fear of the nation and often lies and deceit. What was it? The burning of the Reichswehr, I think. I can't remember what it is. But like a bunch of the early Nazis would burn one of Germany's most important buildings. I cannot remember the name right now. But they would burn this and use it as justification, as a reason why Hitler should be in power, why Nazis should be in power. Because they would lie and say that it was the socialists. They would lie and say it was the left. They would lie and they would say all these other things. And so you have this ideology that is centered around fear. You have a fear that you and people like you are going to be erased. They're going to be attacked. You are going to be treated like cattle. And this is true for your entire nation. And you must defend yourself. Well, we need to layer on top of that the rationale of Christianity. See, this is where I really started being a Christian fascist, when I would hang out with this friend group. And I didn't know it yet. See, we would all be identified Christians at the time, even though none of us really cared that much about the Bible. We focused a lot on the reasoning that we need people who are willing to do what needs to be done to make things better. That was literally our reasoning. And we thought we were it. We thought we were hot shit. We even tried to start our own little secret, society, our own little underground organization where people first and foremost had to be Christian. They had to. They also, first and foremost, needed to undergo some form of militarized or militant training. They needed to know how to use a gun. They needed to know how to defend themselves if they didn't have a gun. They needed to learn all kinds of outdoor and survival skills. We were talking end time kind of preparation. When we actually did this, we would run several miles. We would train how to arm and disarm ourselves. We would train how to take prisoners if they had a rifle. We literally did these things. And we always use the justification that God will smile upon those who fight for him. We use the idea that if God didn't want this, he would have already stopped us. And eventually I started thinking, well, surely we could do more, right? Well, surely we can focus on the here and now, but what about the future? And that's where I fucked up. Because I did not realize at the time I was starting to form eugenic type thinkings or thoughts. I would rationalize that I, being very smart, should be an initial gene seed. that I had learned at the time also about things called savant syndrome and how those on the spectrum really were a part of this. I would double down on this thinking that I could probably be as smart as them. And if we could figure out the right genetic pairings to make this more common or to create more savant kids, then we could literally engineer an army of superhumans or super intelligent humans. I mean, we could literally have manufactured offsprings of the best. That was the thinking. It was literally eugenics, but I didn't know that. I was told eugenics is wrong, but it was never explained to me. I was told that Hitler practiced eugenics. It was never explained to me. I was told, Hitler was a very bad guy that killed a bunch of people. I didn't realize eugenics can often lead to that line of reasoning that you need to eliminate the bad in order to have room for the good. That it is an excuse using I'm losing my words here. Basically, we were using the poorly misunderstood Darwinic line of survival of the fittest as a justification to do this. Now, of course, never happened because for a variety of reasons it can't. But I, at some point, would graduate and I would drift farther away from these friends. And being left to myself, I would be forced to confront so much, so many things that I never really gave more than 2 seconds of a thought. One of the first things that I would be really challenged on was the need for, I don't want to say my family, but this rigid idea of what the family should be and what happens if you don't achieve that. In this context, it's more than just a nuclear family, but a family that would be apart from Christ is not a family kind of mindset. Or it would be a family destined for hell. And being removed from my family, I realized just how toxic a lot of my family members were and how much I really just needed to focus on me. How much I needed to improve to be a better person. I would juggle more sexist problems in my head, and I would be challenged on a lot of them. I would be challenged on the idea of, what a man should be. I would be challenged on my sexuality. I would be challenged at the very core of my faith. And I think the thing that finally made me stop saying I'm Christian was understanding that there is no God in the Bible that could exist, because the God in the Bible that is described and is preached cannot even stand up to basic logic. Simplest point being, a God cannot be both all-knowing and all-good, because otherwise we would have no natural disasters, no qualms, no issues. But then we would also be just like the trees. There would be nothing for us to do. There would be no growth for us to have. There would be no reason to form societies or get better. Hell, I mean, even with the fundamentalist upbringing, the idea of modern society was seen as nothing but sin, because we all came about from the first sin, eating of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. That's kind of what it all boiled down to. And it's just wrong on so many levels. And if that's wrong, what else could I be wrong about? Well, I didn't really challenge the political beliefs until years later. I would have these arguments to myself that I said I need to be anchored by certain beliefs. Let's start basic. Thou shalt not kill. I like that one. That's a pretty good thing. Thou shalt not steal. That's for the most part pretty good, stuff like that, And then we get to more situational things that require context, such as, say I'm in a situation where I have a friend and his ex is trying to figure out where he is so that she can not do anything good, first off. pulling from a real situation, but I'm trying not to describe what happened. But I'm faced with a choice. Do I be honest and tell her where he is, where he'll essentially be assaulted, or do I lie? Well, obviously, I fucking lie. I saved my boy's life that day. You know, she was crazy. But it was a moment where the Bible would have condemned me, but I knew it was the right choice, kind of deal. And I would find myself in other situations like this, such as moments where I steal. Well, why did I steal? Because I'm starving, because I'm homeless, because I have literally no other way to exist. And me tackling the problems of my faith would lead me to tackling problems in politics. When it came time for me to tackle the more fascistic thinking I had adopted for a long time, I didn't really have a concrete place to address it. Mostly also because fascism is a poorly understood term or in political ideology. There was no major exposure at the time for more progressive thinking. Even though I recognize today that I had a lot more progressive ways of thinking even back then, there was no outlet other than TNT or TYT, the Young Turks. And I didn't even watch them because I grew up my entire life being told, by my father that they are idiots, they're ungodly, and they're not worth my time. Stuff like that. He would also say the same thing about MSNBC and CNN. So it doesn't really matter. I never gave them much of a chance, even though I'd have a lot of internal questioning and a lot of internal problems with how I understood the world as I'm trying to unlearn a lot of bad things. I would meet a girl that would, for better and for worse, fundamentally change me and have me question so much. I would have to deal with so many flawed things about myself. My arrogance, my lying, my insecurities, and other things too. I would eventually come face to face with questioning my sexuality, questioning my habits and my ethics, and I would begin to study philosophy on my own. I would begin to actually try to research things on my own properly, not taken just, at face value from some news anchor. I would do my own research. If I had a question about something, I would look on my own. I wouldn't ask for anybody because I felt like it was insufficient. And then 2020 rolled around. George Floyd died. No, George Floyd was murdered. Brutally, needlessly murdered. I understand he was a criminal. That doesn't mean he should have been murdered. I understand the man had a bad history and even bad temper. That doesn't mean he should be murdered. And that's what really kind of shook me and said, okay, these motherfuckers are lying. It wasn't they could be wrong. It was these motherfuckers are lying. And motherfuckers being everyone who had taught me how to live and how to think and, what to think. That's what it was, is I had that moment. And then also, later on next year would be the January 6th insurrection. That is what also made me care so much more about, the actual day-to-day politics. But it was George Floyd that really got me to question where I truly stood on things. That even if I thought I myself was right, that the reality is telling me I'm wrong. And that's dissonant. That dissonance was ringing so loud in my ears that I had to rectify it. I then went out of my way and finally started watching things like TYT, The Humanist Report, The Rational National, The Ring of Fire. I love The Ring of Fire. I love Farron. And so many other indie content creators on YouTube that I had never been exposed to before because of the heavy politically right-leaning content that I had already watched for 10 plus years at that point. So I would force myself to watch these things and constantly go to like other things that were suggested. I would watch a lot of atheist content so that way I could learn and unlearn a lot of bad reasonings, practices, and misinterpretations of the Bible. A lot of things I was never told growing up, such as how a lot of the passages in the Bibles are mistranslated, but we don't say they're mistranslated. A lot of people like to use the argument that, oh, the Bible is like 96% accurate to the original source materials. Like, yeah, if you look at the translation it's taken from, but even that is taken from other translations, which is taken from other translations, which is taken from other translations, blah, blah, blah. So even though it may be accurate to the manuscript that you translated it from, it doesn't mean that the core of the context, the core of the words are truly accurate to what they were written and what they were intended for at the time they were written. This is an example, or an example that can be used is that of, God, I can't remember the Bible passage right now. I believe it's in Romans. It's the one where it says that a man shall not lie with a male. Okay, if you truly believe that this says that homosexuality is condemned in the Bible, first I want you to ask, did Jesus say it? First off, no, he didn't. If Jesus didn't say it, then what's the fucking point? But second off, even if you could ignore that point, why would you specify a difference in man and male? See, when doing more research, I came to learn that the mistranslation here came from a Greco-Roman text, which at the time used the term male to mean young boy, and man to mean older man. So when understanding the context of that passage, you understand that it's condemning pedophilia. Or I guess at the time you would call it pederasty, but it's pedophilia. Which I think we can all agree, fucking terrible. No one should ever be permitted to do it, and the acceptance of such idea is so apocryphal, it already makes me want to throw up in my mouth. But this mistranslation is used not only to demonize, queer folk, it's also used as an argument to justify historical precedents for hating queers for grooming kids. This is something that has already been thrown in my face, even though I don't hear that argument everywhere. And it's just not true. You are using a mistranslated Bible passage to justify your hate. That's what it is. And we can talk about other issues. One of the other things that I would come to realize is that the Bible actually has, a decent take on abortion. If you are willing to be the Christian that likes more Old Testament thinking, well, there is a passage in, I believe it's Numbers. It's like Numbers 5, verses 25 through 31, I think. It's literally laying out the procedure for creating an abortion type drink that was approved by the temple and by God as something to do. Now the reason why is in the Bible. They were saying that she had cheated and she had conceived of another man's seed that wasn't her husband. Okay, it's still an abortion. You're still making an abortion drink. And a lot of people like to throw the reason why as to saying, okay, it's fine. We just won't talk about the fact that it's literally saying God approved an abortion in the Bible. He created a methodology by which he said he likes and you should use. And it's this running away tactic of running away from the answer that I don't like a lot of Christians do. And why I struggled with my faith for a lot of the time. Because if you were right, then nothing should scare you. Nothing should make you be afraid. Because one kind of logical reasoning that luckily has still stayed true with me today is the idea that the absolute universal idea of truth is incorruptible and unbreakable. If you were able to change it, then it obviously wasn't the universal uncorruptible truth. But that doesn't mean to say that there aren't things that are conditionally true. It's just not the same. If we were to say that God would fit this kind of niche of irrefutable truth, then anything that you say is his word should be irrefutable. So why do people run away from arguments whenever somebody makes a good point against them? It's other things like that. They just doesn't add up. You know, I would go through these periods for the past 7, 8 years where I'm just questioning this up until 2020 happens. And I finally get to the point where I am open with myself and with those that I care about. And I say that this isn't me. I am a queer man. I am a man of science. I am a man of compassion. I am a man that cares. I'm not a man who cares about sounding right. I'm a man who cares about knowing what's right. And that has rubbed some people the wrong way. But luckily, what I feared the most didn't happen. I feared that in coming out and being who I am, I would be condemned by my family. It did not happen, thank God, though it's not like it's been smooth sailing since. I am trying to be the man that I wanted, my father to be, and to be the man I think everyone else is. I am still learning. I have a lot of political theory and philosophical theory that I still want to read up on in order to better re-inform myself in my opinions. I want to be as far removed from that little fascist I was, and I want to be the man that I knew I could be whenever I was young. I want to be the man that shows my father that good can still come of the world, regardless of what he thinks. That at the end of the day, I am a good man. That I am what I preach, you know? It's hard. I fuck up, like everyone else does. But I also, most importantly, want to show that you can still love, even if you don't believe in God. Because that's one of the things that if you grew up a lot, especially in an evangelical or fundy household, that you'll hear. That no one can truly love you unless they are a believer. And it's a verbal tactic to train you to hate people who aren't Christians. It's not taught like that. It's not spoken like that. But that is the reality of what it is. When you are told that there is no genuine love unless it's a Christian love, you're already saying that nobody truly cares about you and they're all out to get you. That is how it will be internalized, especially as a kid. But I'm lucky I was able to get away from that. I'm lucky I was able to do better and learn better. I'm lucky I never stopped asking questions. But I'm also considering myself lucky that I did not let my hate win. Because one thing I didn't cover was how much I did hate. And even now, how much I feel I really do hate or want to hate. Hate who? The people who kind of made me that way. The churches, the preachers, the liars at the pulpit, you know. When I see somebody at that podium when I was younger, I couldn't honestly tell you what I really thought of them. Sometimes I just feel like they're old men just trying to pass on the last bits of pearls of wisdom that they have. But nowadays I just feel like they're old men that are spreading as much lies as they can while they're taking your money. Don't believe me? Just look at people like Joel Osteen. But that's neither here nor there. I don't plan to really open up more on my life right now, but I did feel it was important to know where I come from, to know what is it that I'm building off of? What is it that I'm coming away from? Where does my personal feelings and vindications come from when it comes to this? That's what I want. If you guys have anything about this, anything that you feel like relates to you that I said, learn from it, please. Figure out how to apply it yourself. If you feel like there are things that you are lacking, that you are just now for the first time being aware of, don't lose that thought. Don't lose that question. Explore it. Examine it on your own. Do your own research. Find the things that are factually verifiable if it's something like that. If it's more philosophical, you're going to have to do a lot more introspective thinking. But that's okay. Do it. engage with the thinking, engage with the learning, because there's so much about yourself I guarantee that you will uncover if you are just nice enough to yourself to say, hey, let's figure out what we don't know. Let's figure out where we may be fucking up. That's it. That's all it takes. You just gotta be willing to ask yourself a question and explore it. But if I keep talking about this, I'll just be rambling on into nothingness. So I think I'm going to go ahead and leave this here. I just want you guys to know that I do really appreciate those who listen, and that as we grow, I hope to hear more of y'all's stories, everything that, you know, got you guys to where you're at now, or even the things that you're struggling with, the things that you are questioning, whether it's your sexuality, your beliefs, your core reasonings for certain things in life, you know, your philosophical understandings, your historical knowledge. Challenge it. Make sure you know what you actually know. Make sure that if there are any pieces of your education that you are lacking, that you fill it properly. Because it is important that your future implications have a solid foundation. You know? I hope you guys took away a lot of this, because this was hard for me to talk about. But when we get back to this, we are going to have an episode next week where we're going to cover something a little different. You know, this episode we covered a lot about my personal life, but we're going to be covering what comes after. We're going to be talking a little bit about death and the role that that plays in our future, and how that affects the planet. So hopefully a little more cheery conversation, as we're going to have an interview. I haven't recorded it yet, so I hope it goes great. But with all that being said, just know that Mama Terra loves you, and you all have a great one.
Tongue-tied in the rain, soaked to my toes, got the chills to the bone. Cold stare through the haze, shrill in my voice and my lungs swell with pain. Call me out by my name, speak to me soft, help me gather my thoughts. Drown it out, plug the drain. Turn the record over, it can't be over. Ah, 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 ah. Write me when you get there, to that better place where you can think straight. Send me love if you can. Manifest the best of your wildest fantasies. I hope you find what you need. Over the hills, sun sets in the trees, soak in the glorious rays. The sun will be out, beating down on your shoulders. Tie a rope round my waist as I venture into the dark. I'll be back by the time you finally know where you are. Tear my ego apart. We are all we are, and we are all but one. Send me up to the stars. The distance between means nothing to me. or bury me in the sand. After I've done for you all that I can, I'll tell you what I knew, but I've got no concept of what I'll know. Leave a breadcrumb trail for the